Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Bold and Beautiful today. Nick proposes to Brooke with a ring in the ship middle of the sea. Ridge jumps from the shore to the sea. Eric's hand is raised and tells him to stop. Ridge's audacious move, Nick's boat proposal, and Eric's rage. But Ridge Forrester could try a risky rescue when Brooke Logan fell into the sea. The fury of Eric Forrester. First, let's talk about Eric Forrester, who got into a heated argument with Nick during the fashion presentation. Ridge's challenger was cautioned by the patriarch to avoid Brooke. The seaman, however, has never been one to follow directions. Brooke, meanwhile, ultimately came to the conclusion that she could no longer do this with Ridge. She simply can't stand her heart's never-ending roller coaster anymore. He sought to hang on rather than let Brooke leave in peace. The fall of Brooke Logan. Brooke didn't turn around when she eventually left Ridge. Not once. Every time Brooke leaves Ridge, she turns around. She may therefore really be over him and prepared for her journey with Nick. Unfortunately, it appears that Nick's plan to buy a boat will not work out. Somehow, Brooke tumbles into the sea. I wonder whether Nick stuns Brooke rather than surprises her, therefore it's his fault that she almost drowns. The rescue operation of Ridge Forrester. Ridge appears to be there to save the day when Brooke falls off the boat. In the past, rescuing compulsions forced Ridge to reunite in soap operas. But I'm hoping that after thanking him, Brooke will agree to Nick's suggestion. Fans would finally applaud, that would be soap opera gold. We might be lucky with a last-minute swerve, but it's unlikely. Nick's marriage proposal fails, and Brooke has an accident. The accident involving Brooke Logan is imminent. Since Nick Marone's marriage proposal is going to fail, let's discuss their sad journey. Brooke is prepared to accept the new direction that Nick is providing now that she has accepted his hand. Brooke is captivated to Nick and his commitment because she is sick of Ridge Forrester denying their fate. Nick will soon be treating Brooke to a romantic dinner on a boat, and he intends to make a lavish show of love to end it all. Nick hopes Brooke will accept his proposal of marriage again because he has an engagement ring for her. Ridge will then experience a range of emotions in Friday's B&B episode, including anguish, rage, jealousy, and more. Ridge will continue to be in Brooke's heart, but will watch him pout and rage as Nick receives all of her attention. Naturally, Nick and Brooke's amorous encounter will not go as planned. Because Brooke is going to have an accident, things are going to go horribly wrong. Brooke appears to be preparing for a scenario in which she falls into the sea and needs to be rescued. Ridge should be watching from a distance when he sees Brooke fall because he will ultimately realize that she is in trouble. Eric Forrester will hope for a reunion between Brooke and Ridge while Ridge prepares to save Brooke. Eric will still rely on fate to reunite Ridge and Brooke, even though Nick has been disobeying his repeated warnings. Eric has some good news coming his way because of the impending accident in Italy and Ridge's ultimate decision to realize who his true love is. Keep checking back for updates on the next stage of Brooke and Ridge's romance because they still have a future together. Eric Forrester's simmering paternal fury finally boiled over, directed squarely at the rugged interloper threatening his fractured family's fragile equilibrium, Nick Marone. Eric, the patriarch whose very presence usually commanded hushed respect, found his composure shattered as he confronted Nick amidst the post-show buzz, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that cut through the champagne-fueled chatter. His warning was a command forged in decades of authority and a desperate desire to shield Brooke Logan, the luminous yet perpetually storm-tossed woman who had been both daughter-in-law and heartbreak to his family. Steer clear of Brooke, Marone. You don't belong in her world, and you bring nothing but chaos. Eric's eyes, usually twinkling with avuncular warmth, were chips of ice, radiating a protective fury born of witnessing too many of Brooke's heartbreaks, too many manipulations, and the deep-seated belief that Nick was merely another disruptive force exploiting her vulnerability. Yet, Nick, the self-made seaman whose life had been defined by navigating treacherous waters and defying expectations, met Eric's ultimatum not with deference, but with a steely, unyielding gaze and a posture that spoke of a man who answered only to his own compass. I don't take orders, Eric, Nick retorted, his voice calm but laced with an iron resolve that bordered on defiance, especially not about the woman I love. Brooke makes her own choices. This public rebuff, this dismissal of his patriarchal decree, ignited a deeper, more visceral rage within Eric, a fury that pulsed beneath his carefully tailored suit, transforming the triumphant event into a battleground where family loyalty clashed with perceived outsider intrusion, leaving Eric silently vowing that Nick's trespass would not go unchallenged. His anger a dark cloud hanging over the festivities long after Nick had turned away, unintimidated and utterly resolved to pursue his course. Meanwhile, in the quiet aftermath of the public spectacle and Eric's confrontation, Brooke Logan had reached a profound, soul-weary conclusion within the gilded cage of her relationship with Ridge Forrester. The years of dizzying highs and devastating lows, the constant push and pull, the betrayals both real and perceived, the exhausting cycle of passionate reunions and shattering separations, had finally taken an irrevocable toll. Her heart, once resilient, felt bruised beyond repair. The emotional roller coaster Ridge seemed perpetually to engineer, leaving her breathless and drained. "I can't do this anymore, Ridge," she stated, her voice surprisingly steady, devoid of the usual tears or wavering uncertainty that often accompanied their partings. "Not the lies, not the games, not the constant wondering when the next storm will hit. My heart, it just can't take the ride anymore." This declaration wasn't a negotiation tactic or a ploy for attention, it was the quiet, definitive end of a decades-long dance. As she walked away from him, towards an uncertain future but away from the familiar pain, she did the unthinkable, she didn't look back. Not once. That single act, the absence of the habitual, longing glance over her shoulder that had punctuated countless previous exits, spoke volumes more than any tearful monologue. It signaled a fracture deeper than before, a finality that resonated in the stunned silence she left behind. Ridge, confronted not with hysterics but with this chilling, resolute calm, found his usual arsenal of charm, demands, and grand gestures useless. He reached out, physically and emotionally, a desperate Brooke, weight, escaping him, an instinctive grab to hold on to the epic love story that defined him, but his hands closed on empty air. She was already gone, her steps carrying her not just out of the room, but seemingly out of his orbit, her gaze fixed firmly ahead, perhaps towards the promise of calmer waters and a simpler, more stable love embodied by the steadfast Nick Marone, a man offering not turbulent passion, but a safe harbor. This unprecedented resolve, this refusal to glance back, whispered that Brooke Logan might truly, finally, be done with Ridge Forrester, ready to embrace a new chapter and the adventurous, uncomplicated devotion Nick promised. Seizing the moment of Brooke's apparent liberation and determined to prove himself the sanctuary she craved, Nick orchestrated a grand, romantic gesture designed to sweep her off her feet and cement their future, a sunset cruise on his magnificent yacht, the gentle sway of the Pacific replacing the turmoil of Los Angeles. As the sky blazed with oranges and purples, painting the water in fiery hues, Nick led Brooke to the bow, the city lights a distant glitter. His heart pounded with anticipation, believing this perfect setting would be the ideal backdrop for the question he longed to ask. With the sea breeze in her hair and the vast, calming ocean before them, Nick dropped to one knee, pulling out a dazzling solitaire diamond ring that caught the dying light. "Brooke Logan," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "you are the calm after every storm I've ever known. Will you marry me? Let me spend the rest of my life loving you, protecting you, giving you the peace you deserve?" But the sheer suddenness, the overwhelming nature of the proposal following so closely on the heels of her painful split from Ridge, proved catastrophic. Instead of joyous surprise, Brooke was visibly stunned, her eyes widening not with delight, but with shock and a flicker of panic. She took an involuntary step back, her hand flying to her chest as if physically struck by the magnitude of the question. That single, reflexive movement, on the subtly shifting deck, was her undoing. Her heel caught on a coiled line or an uneven plank, her balance vanished, and with a sharp gasp swallowed by the wind, Brooke Logan pitched backwards over the polished teak railing, disappearing into the churning, darkening water below. The idyllic scene shattered instantly. Nick's triumphant smile vanished, replaced by pure horror and gut-wrenching guilt. His grand, loving proposal hadn't ushered in a new beginning, it had, through its overwhelming intensity and perhaps his own misjudgment of her fragile state, directly caused the woman he loved to plunge into the perilous sea. The ring, a symbol of commitment, lay forgotten on the deck as Nick scrambled to the rail, his frantic cries of "Brooke! Man overboard!" cutting through the peaceful evening, the perfect proposal transformed into a nightmare of his own making. As chaos erupted on the yacht, with Nick bellowing orders and crew scrambling, another figure had been drawn to the shoreline, haunted and unable to let go. Ridge Forrester, driven by a toxic mix of love, obsession, and the chilling finality of Brooke walking away without a backward glance, had followed the yacht at a distance, unable to resist the pull of the woman who was his eternal magnetic north. He watched from the shadows of the marina, his heart a leaden weight, as the yacht sailed into the sunset, a sunset symbolizing the end of their story, he feared. Then, through binoculars or perhaps just a gut-wrenching sense of dread, he witnessed the unthinkable, Brooke stumble, her fall, her terrifying disappearance beneath the waves. Every instinct, every fiber of his being screamed into action. Rational thought vanished, replaced by pure, adrenaline-fueled desperation. Without hesitation, without pausing to shed his jacket or shoes, Ridge sprinted down the dock, a man possessed. He didn't call for help, he didn't wait. He saw only Brooke in danger, and the years of complex history, the betrayals, the pain, none of it mattered in that singular, terrifying moment. He launched himself off the end of the pier in a powerful, reckless dive, cutting through the water with furious strokes towards the spot where she'd vanished. The cold Pacific water was a shock, but it was nothing compared to the icy fear gripping him. He dove deep, fighting the current, his eyes straining through the murky twilight, driven by a primal need that eclipsed all reason. He found her, a pale shape sinking, seemingly lifeless. Grabbing her, he kicked with all his might towards the surface, gasping for air as he broke through, clutching her tightly, shouting her name, his voice raw with terror and a love as deep and turbulent as the ocean itself. He hauled her towards the nearest dock piling, holding her head above water, performing frantic rescue breaths amidst the waves, his entire world reduced to the feel of her skin, the desperate hope for a breath, a sign of life, a daring, instinctive move born not of calculation, but of an undeniable, all-consuming bond that even their bitterest parting couldn't sever. He saved her life, a hero in the moment, driven by a force deeper than anger or pride. Dragged from the water, coughing and shivering but miraculously alive, Brooke lay on the dock, wrapped in blankets, the chaos slowly subsiding into stunned silence. Nick hovered nearby, pale and shaken, his face etched with guilt and relief, the engagement ring a cold, heavy secret in his pocket. Ridge knelt beside her, soaked and trembling not from the cold water but from the aftershock of nearly losing her forever, his hands gripping hers, his eyes searching hers, filled with a raw, unvarnished fear and love that transcended words. The air crackled with the weight of the rescue, the history, the unspoken expectations. In classic soap opera lore, this moment, the life-saving heroism, the vulnerability, the intense proximity, would be the catalyst, the undeniable pull forcing Bridge back into each other's arms, erasing the recent split with the brush of near death. Ridge, clinging to her hand, perhaps whispered a broken plea, "Don't leave me, not like that. Never like that." The audience would hold its breath, expecting the tearful reunion. But then, Brooke slowly, deliberately, squeezed Ridge's hand back, not with romantic longing, but with profound gratitude. Her voice, though weak, was clear as she looked into his eyes. "Thank you, Ridge. Thank you for saving my life." The words were genuine, deeply felt, but they carried a distinct finality. She then gently, firmly, extracted her hand from his grasp. Turning her head, her gaze settled on Nick, who flinched, expecting condemnation. Instead, Brooke offered him a small, understanding, albeit weary, smile. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she spoke, her voice gaining strength, directed at Nick. "I'm okay, and Nick?" He stepped closer, bracing himself. Brooke reached out, not for Ridge, but for Nick's hand. "Yes," she said, the word simple yet echoing with monumental significance in the salt-tinged air. "My answer is yes." The twist was breathtaking. Ridge, the heroic rescuer, was left kneeling on the cold dock, physically present but emotionally stranded, watching in stunned disbelief as Brooke, saved by his hands, chose Nick and the promise of a different future. Nick, reeling from causing the accident, was granted an unexpected, glorious redemption. Eric's fury at Nick would now reach volcanic proportions, knowing his warning was ignored and his rival had won. And Brooke, demonstrating newfound agency, used the trauma not to fall back into old patterns, but to decisively step forward into a new, uncertain adventure, making Ridge's daring rescue not a bridge back to her, but the final, dramatic act closing the book on their latest, tumultuous chapter. It was pure, unadulterated soap gold, a moment of high drama, emotional whiplash, and a deliciously unexpected turn that promised even more turbulent waters ahead, leaving fans gasping, cheering, and utterly hooked. Brooke Logan's tentative step onto the polished deck of the sleek yacht, her hand securely enveloped in Nick Marone's larger, reassuring one, this moment, bathed in the warmth of the late afternoon and the even warmer intensity of Nick's devoted gaze, felt like a deliberate turning of the page, a conscious choice to silence the relentless, painful static of uncertainty that Ridge Forrester had orchestrated in her heart for far too long. Exhaustion, profound and bone-deep, had settled upon Brooke like a heavy shroud woven from years of Ridge's equivocations, his maddening inability to fully commit, to unequivocally acknowledge the grand, tumultuous, seemingly preordained destiny that pulsed between them like a shared heartbeat, a destiny he constantly invoked yet perpetually fled. Ridge's perpetual dance on the edge of forever, his retreats into the shadows of indecision whenever the brilliance of their connection threatened to solidify, had finally eroded her legendary resilience, leaving her spirit raw and vulnerable, craving the solid ground of unwavering devotion that Nick offered with such open-hearted constancy. In Nick, Brooke found a sanctuary, a harbor where her worth wasn't questioned daily, where love wasn't a battlefield strewn with emotional landmines but a steady, reliable flame. His eyes reflected pure adoration, his actions spoke of a commitment unclouded by the ghosts of other women or the crippling fear of finally choosing, and in this stark contrast to Ridge's tortured ambivalence, Brooke felt an undeniable pull, a gravitational force drawing her towards the simpler, more secure affection Nick embodied, a soothing balm on the deep, aching wounds Ridge's indecision had inflicted. It was this potent cocktail of weariness, longing for stability, and genuine appreciation for Nick's steadfast presence that propelled her onto this luxurious vessel, a floating stage meticulously set by Nick for the culmination of his deepest desire. He had orchestrated every detail with the meticulous care of a man crafting his ultimate masterpiece. The crisp white linens on the intimate table fluttered like captured doves in the gentle sea breeze, already bearing the glint of crystal and the promise of exquisite cuisine. Chilled champagne awaited its celebratory pop. The soundtrack was the rhythmic sigh of the waves against the hull and the distant cries of gulls, a symphony of romance composed solely for her. Nick's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of anticipation and barely contained hope, for nestled deep within his pocket lay the cold, heavy symbol of his future, an engagement ring of breathtaking elegance, a glittering circle of platinum and diamonds designed to eclipse Brooke's previous bands, a tangible plea for her to once again become his wife. To solidify this new path he believed they were forging together away from the Forrester maelstrom. He envisioned the moment, Brooke's eyes widening in surprise, then softening with joyful tears as he knelt, the Mediterranean sunset painting the sky in hues of fire and passion mirroring his own feelings, her whispered yes carried away on the salt-tinged wind, sealing their reunion not just as lovers, but as partners bound by the sacred vow he ached to renew. Unbeknownst to the couple adrift on their gilded dream, miles away amidst the timeless grandeur of Rome or perhaps brooding within the opulent confines of a Forrester villa overlooking the very same sea, Ridge Forrester was trapped in a private hell of his own making, a maelstrom of corrosive emotions churning violently within him. Friday's episode promised a spectacle of Ridge in torment, a man sculpted from arrogance now reduced to a raw nerve ending, riding a brutal emotional roller coaster fueled by a toxic cocktail of jealousy, impotent anger, and a pain so sharp it threatened to cleave him in two. The mere thought of Brooke, his Brooke, basking in Nick's undivided attention, accepting Nick's touch, sharing intimate laughter and whispered promises on that damned boat, ignited a furnace of possessiveness deep in his gut. He would mope through grand rooms that felt suddenly cavernous and empty, he would fume silently, his jaw clenched so tight it ached, his fists balled at his sides as vivid, unwelcome images of their happiness assaulted him. Nick's hand brushing Brooke's cheek, Nick's lips close to her ear, Nick presenting the ring Ridge somehow knew was there. Every reported smile Brooke offered Nick felt like a betrayal, every moment of her contentment in another man's arms a fresh lash across his soul. Yet, beneath the raging storm of jealousy, a quieter, more terrifying truth pulsed relentlessly. Brooke remained embedded in the very core of his being, a constant, undeniable presence in his heart. He knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that she still loved him, that the bond they shared, forged in decades of fire and passion, couldn't be severed by Nick's earnest devotion or his own monumental mistakes. This knowledge only amplified his agony, transforming his jealousy into a desperate, clawing need he refused to articulate but couldn't escape. Meanwhile, Eric Forrester, the patriarch observing the unfolding drama with a weary, knowing gaze, clung to a different kind of certainty. Despite Nick's polite but firm dismissal of his repeated, almost paternal warnings, pleased to consider the volatile, undeniable chemistry between Brooke and Ridge, cautions against building a future on potentially shifting sands, Eric held fast to an unshakable faith in destiny. He saw the grand design, the invisible threads woven through decades, and he believed, with the quiet conviction of a seasoned general, that fate itself was merely biding its time, waiting for the perfect, inevitable moment to snap Brooke and Ridge back together, where they belonged. He watched Nick's confident pursuit with a mixture of pity and impatience, silently counting down to the cosmic correction he was certain was imminent.